Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome back to the regional workshop on enhancing inclusive and equitable quality education in Southeast Asia through educational leadership and management, hosted by SEAMEO Retract in collaboration with SEAMEO Secretariat. We will start day 2 with a keynote speech from a speaker from a SEAMEO associate member country, Dr. Howard Youngs. Dr. Howard Youngs is a senior lecturer and postgraduate research supervisor in educational leadership. His teaching workshops, writing and research focus on rethinking leadership, so deep transformation occurs in and through people, so organizations develop. This is especially in the areas of teaching, learning, distributed leadership, resilience, and practices that build collaborative harmony. As a leader in international leadership and teacher development projects, he has had privilege of spending time in Southeast Asian nations, as well as presenting in SEAMEO events. In his leadership workshop, he is currently working alongside participants to help them regrow resilience in their organizations because of the impact of the pandemic has had on education and well-being. And the keynote speech of Dr. Howard Youngs is alignment, flexibility, and equity, inclusive system leadership and local leadership practices, New Zealand and Southeast Asian perspective. Dr. Howard Youngs, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Howard Youngs from New Zealand.
Kia ora koutou, and as I say, greetings from Auckland, New Zealand here, where it is early in the afternoon, and I know it is early in the morning for you. I'm just going to share my screen. So you should be able to see that now. Can I just have someone just say they can see the screen okay? Oh, hang on, here we go. Is that okay for everybody?
Yes, we can see it now. Thank you, Dr.
Okay,
Young.
great. Thank you. Excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, look, I first of all just want to honour and thank the presenters yesterday who actually gave much insight into what's happening around the Southeast Asian region. And in this presentation today, I just want to touch on some of the things that were said yesterday, but I also want to leave you with some things to think about that you can do next week in your organizations, but also in your communities. So let's have a look. Oops, just go back one, sorry about that, a little delay. So look, we're all well aware of the impact that the pandemic has had on education. And this is where, again, with the United Nations and also UNESCO and also with SEAMEO as well, you're well aware of what the data is showing and the impact that it has had on education and on our communities and on our economies as well. So the global pandemic has been a game changer, and it's been a game changer in a very major way. You know, to the extent where the strategic plans that we had written before the pandemic now have to be changed. So if you still have some strategic plans that have not yet been changed because of the pandemic, it's really important that you do so. I'm just going to use 3 words here that are not mine. They came out in an article written by an Australian school leader, Deborah Nitaleki, and saying that it's very helpful for us not to think about going back to what we used to do. Instead, to use these words. Before the pandemic, to use the word old normal. The time we're in right now is the new normal, and the next normal. What is that when we are out of the pandemic? So rather than say, let's go back to what we used to be doing and do more of that, we need to be thinking about the next normal. And one of the reasons for that is because the already disadvantaged in our communities and in those involved in education and learning, students, those people have become even more disadvantaged because of the pandemic. The inequity gaps have broadened and we've become even more aware of them. So just before I go any further, it's important that we just distinguish the difference between equality and equity. So equality is where we treat everybody in an equal way and irrespective of their needs, the barriers they face, and their cultural identity and their gender. Now, if we only focus on equality by doing the same approach for everybody, of course, that maintains exclusiveness. It doesn't build inclusiveness. And the gap between the haves and the have-nots just widens. And that's because we need to actually have a view of what equity is and realize how different that is from equality. So equity is treating each others differently, and that's depending on their need so that we can remove those barriers. And our distinguished presenter from Singapore yesterday gave us that picture at the very end of the presentation about not just helping those stand up to look over the fence, but also removing the fence as well. So this is where is what we call culturally responsive teaching, leadership and policy comes in. And I'm going to use this word voice. All groups have voice, and especially the minority ones, especially the voice of the disadvantaged. Now, inclusive education or inclusive educational leadership helps break down barriers of exclusion. And that is where the gaps between the haves and the have-nots does not continue to increase. And ideally, we want to see those gaps actually vanish altogether. But that might take a generation or two to achieve that. So I just want to introduce you to a way of thinking here. I've called this inclusive leadership, which is, we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about innovative leadership and management practices. There's another word I think we need in there that brings inclusion and leadership together, and innovative. It's radical. We need radical leadership practices if we're going to address those barriers and see them pull down. Let's have a look at this here. Now, as I just mentioned, you know, inclusive leadership it can increase in different ways. But let's have a look at the levels here. And I wonder whereabouts you are personally, just you, not your organization. But then I wonder where your organization is at, and then maybe parts, say, a part of your region or part of your local community, and also part of your nation. So let's have a look at this. On the left-hand side there, you see the brown colors. On the right-hand side, you see the green colors. And those ones on the left-hand side, the brown ones are to do with us. That's you and me. Those of us who are involved in this workshop over this day and a half, you could say we are the advantaged ones. There's others who would maybe dream of being involved in a 1.5 day workshop like this. So we have a thing about the disadvantage. We did talk yesterday about disadvantaged groups. So let's have a look at that first level. This is where change is done to those who are disadvantaged by those who are advantaged by the likes of you and me. But the barriers remain. And this is where the disadvantaged are treated the same as the advantaged. And so most importantly, the disadvantaged have no say in the decisions that are affecting them. And this is because the advantaged fear that if they gave away too much, they might lose something if they try and help too much those who are disadvantaged. And let's be honest, that can be a challenge at times for us all. But let's get into level 2 here. The disadvantaged are consulted. So have a think about some who are disadvantaged, maybe some of your students, some of their families, those people who live nearby you in your communities. They might be consulted Their voices might be heard, but the change is still led by those of us who are advantaged. And we also assume we know what is best for them. Now, when we're working with cultural minority groups, this is where things can break down, because they might think differently and do things differently. And if we keep doing things to them and assuming we know best, we're still going to have that barrier in place. Let's move to level 3. Now, the voices of the disadvantaged are starting to be heard. And from the advantage, there's lots of acts of compassion and support. But change is still being led by those who are advantaged. Now, as I say, as we go through these levels, this is over like maybe 2 or 3 decades, 20 to 30 years. And I know a lot of you are down this track already, which is amazing. Level 4, this is where we co-lead with the disadvantaged. So think of it, say, minority cultural group. Their leaders are working with your leaders, and they're influencing the consultation process. And the agenda for change is mainly shaped by the disadvantaged. So if you are working with communities who are deaf or hard of hearing, they are helping shape the changes that are being made. And the advantaged, that's us, we support and resource the disadvantaged who actually have their own agenda for how they can make things better. Now, level 5 is the radical part. This is where the barriers are no longer evident. And in this sort of area here, those who are disadvantaged, who had barriers, they're no longer in existence. They now self-determine what is best for them. And they choose to integrate maybe with the majority. And it's their choice. And of course, that has implications around sharing the political and cultural power base as well. But that's where true, authentic transformation ends up in the freeing of people from the barriers that they face. So I'm now going to ask you some questions. And I'm not going to ask you to put this up in the, to reply on the chat, but I'd like you just to think. When you have a look at those other levels there, what shade of brown represents your school or your HEI or your organization? What level do you think you're working at there? So just for a moment, just have a think. What shade of brown do you honestly think your organization is currently working at? And now I want you to do the same. I want you to think about the students who are in your organization or those in the community who your organization reaches out to. I want you just to think about those students or those community members who are disadvantaged in some way. How much say do they have at the moment? And what color green would you give them? So I'll just go quiet again for about 30 seconds and just ask you to reflect on that. Right, and then the next question is this one. In the times where I've had the privilege of walking in some of your cities, and I've had somebody who's hosted me, who's taken me down some back streets to just to a place where you locals go and eat, so I could have the privilege of having that experience. Along the way, I would see the disadvantaged on the street. So what about the disadvantaged who are not in your school, but are in your community, and you walk past them or drive past them every day, and you know they're there? What color green would you give those people? These are ones that you're not responsible for in your organization, but this is for you at a more personal level. Who are those people, and what color green would you give them? So here's my key point here, everybody, is 2 key questions, reflective ones. How far are you really willing to go? And I ask myself that question as well. How far am I willing to go? And because the other thing is radical change does not occur quickly. And many of our speakers attested to that yesterday, that we're in this for the long journey. And I just want to say that must be everybody listening, you've got such a heart of compassion in terms of wanting to see other people flourish and do really well. And that's the heart of an educator. And that's all of you listening at the moment. So here are some specific questions that you can even do next week when you sit down with some of your colleagues. But I'm going to add one other little bit to it. Who are the disadvantaged students in your place? And I just want to acknowledge our speaker from Laos yesterday, who acknowledged that, hey, we don't have enough data yet to be able to identify everybody. These are the ones who maybe aren't in the school system or on the fringes. And, you know, I just hope that your efforts there in Laos just go really well in that area. So what are their challenges? Now, here is the key part. When we say, hey, students, what are your challenges? It's not for us to give an answer. We have to go to the students and ask them. And this is one of the lessons we've learned here in New Zealand, is that a teacher, not just a person who's a senior leader, but a teacher, you go to your students and you say, hey, what would help you learn more? Or tell me what I do that helps you learn. And this is where student voice comes in, and particularly if you go to the disadvantage and ask them that question. And look, I acknowledge it must be many of you are doing that, but it's something that you can do on Monday next week, is to ask that question. And then what about those communities that are around you? Do they have voice? When you're reaching out to them through their students, and what are they saying in terms of what the barriers are? And I know many of you are doing that, but I just want to encourage you not just to rely on a survey or what somebody else says, but that we can actually do this face to face. And of course, we acknowledge the pandemic has made learning a lot more challenging for them. So here's the other part. And how can you connect with those not in your organization who are disadvantaged? So here's the question. Who are the young in the streets and in the shadows of your city or in the shadows of your town? Not all of them are from your town and your city. Some of them have come from another district. Some have come looking for work. And you know that some of them are younger than 15 or 16 and really should be in school. So I wonder, for your school or your HEI or your organization, how can you be reaching out to them or connecting with other organizations that are reaching out to them, as some of you have done? So here's the other question, is that why do some of those people, young people, why do they have to work too soon before, before they're 15 or 16? And how can we get them back into the education system? But we need to make this personal, not just leave it to a big organization like SEAMEO to try and find an answer, or to the government to find an answer. It's you and I together every day, as we walk past people like this, is to be inquiring. So I did talk about the importance of data, and there's also just a problem here as well. We have to be careful that we use data in a very helpful way. And I gave that illustration from Laos just before. And also yesterday we heard how, like in Singapore, they're now looking at how, based on the data, but to have a blended approach to blur the distinctions between students and how they're using data to help that, which is really good. But here's the thing we've got to be careful of, is that sometimes we can overemphasize numbers and data. If numbers get overemphasized, we can do what's called, we can dehumanize what we're trying to do. And so we might say, hey, we've gone from 4% down to 3% now who are having reading challenges at this level. Yay. And so we can kind of think, oh, we're doing such a good job. However, we can then miss what it's like for that individual child who struggles even to get to school. And so it's important that on the one hand, we do have data, and on the other hand, we make sure that we don't just rely on data, but that we also reach out in a very personal one-on-one way. My last sentence there is the main one. Local solutions are needed for local people. Yes, we need our regional organizations there doing all the amazing work they're doing, like UNESCO and SEAMEO. But we have to be tailored for local solutions. Now, here's just another little thing, is that international policy transfer. Please don't just go and borrow what's happening in another nation, particularly a Western nation, and assume it's going to work in your nation. Because quite often international policy transfer does not lead to transformation. That's why we need local solutions. And it's just good to be reminded of that. So now I'm just going to provide a snapshot of some examples from Aotearoa. That's our Indigenous Māori word for New Zealand. And I just want to take us immediately into our curriculum. So in the New Zealand curriculum, yes, we have our learning areas, which I have not listed here, or our curriculum areas, as some of you might call them. But I just want to emphasize that the values that have been in there since 2007, on the left-hand side, diversity. That's celebrating diversity, not trying to make everybody the same. Equity, community, and participation. And in the middle there, the key competencies which our teachers actively build into their teaching of their subject, like relating to others, participating and contributing. And then down the bottom there, what are the key principles that sit beneath our curriculum? We have our founding national document, the Treaty of Waitangi, which is between our Indigenous Māori people and the Crown, which was at the time representing the British government. And of course, we now have our own government. And our government over the last 40 to 50 years has been putting right the wrongs that were done towards our Indigenous Māori people. We still have some way to go. But I wonder in your nation, who are now some of the minority groups who have not had things their own way, and they've been disadvantaged because of that. And here in New Zealand, putting things right from the past is very, very important, as well as cultural diversity and inclusion. But they're right there in our curriculum document. So I just want to draw on a research project and a professional learning development project that took place over a space of 2 decades here in New Zealand. It's by Russell Bishop and others. Professor Russell Bishop, basically, look, they really targeted our Indigenous Māori students. And they found 2 things. Number one, they went to the students and said, what helps you learn? And so remember, some of these students you might categorize as being disadvantaged in some way. I mean, they're getting taught in English, and English is not their Indigenous language. And they have so much to offer. Actually, I'm a visitor to my land of New Zealand because I'm not Indigenous. Now, one thing that the researchers found and teachers found is they asked their students, and you can do this next week, what is it that helps you learn? And the majority of students will come back and say, when we experience what's called whakawhanaungatanga. And whakawhanaungatanga in te reo Māori, in English, it means I feel like I'm part of the family in a classroom. That's what helps me learn. And the other one is this here. This is the big takeaway for all of us from this research, is to question our own assumptions about people who have barriers to learning. For example, we might just say, oh, in my class, I've got some from that group in my class. They never do as well as the students from this other group. If any of us think like that, the barrier is going to stay. It's our assumptions that we have about different groups, about those who are disadvantaged, that have to be challenged. That is one of the biggest things and most, I guess, more straightforward things. It is complex, but we can do that over the weekend. We can start to do that on Monday next week, is to challenge our own assumptions we have about disadvantaged groups. If any of us have any sign of what we call deficit thinking, that we think this group is always going to be disadvantaged, or this group aren't as good at this because they come from this place, or because they're hard of hearing, or because maybe in some places they might say because they're girls, which is really sad. So if any of us think like that, that is the first thing that we have to work on. We can pour lots and lots of money into things, but it's our attitude, it's what's sitting beneath in us. If we think that any one group is better at learning than another group, then that is going to maintain a barrier in place. Now, that's not me saying that. That's out of Professor Russell Bishop's and others' research here in New Zealand. So he talks about a teacher is meant to teach to the Northeast, where they have a lot of focus on building student relationships, and they've got the high teaching skills as well. Here's one or two other little things from New Zealand. And again, this is what I've done here is a mixture of like a national program, like on the left-hand side there, but these are little individual ones. Yesterday, I heard some people talk about the importance of mother tongue. And look, we've found in some schools here in New Zealand where some students, if they are being taught their mother tongue, they get better at English as well, rather than just focus on English. And this one here, there'll be people in disadvantaged groups who have never gone to university in your nation. But what can be done to help them get into their first degree program and graduate? You see, then they become an inspiration for others in that disadvantaged group. One of the things, especially like at the university where I work and other places across New Zealand, if a Māori student wishes to submit an assignment in Māori, they can, not in English. And here's the other little thing is, and again, it's a small group, I'm just talking about 6 or 7 schools who work together. Rather than looking at literacy and numeracy, they've been focusing on how do we improve the well-being of this minority group in our schools. And as they've been focusing on that and working with the students, they've found that their actual learning has improved. So that's by focusing on well-being. So like other nations around the world, New Zealand has seen a drop-off of students returning to schools. So our government has putting some financial incentives and support in place to try and address that issue. And also, like you, some of our students are behind in terms of their reading and their development. And also, when I say development, I also mean social development. Some teachers have been telling me that the students have forgotten how to work their way through conflict together, because they've been away from each other for so long when they've been in isolation. So here's a couple of quick examples. Just one school board that I know of, they had parents in their area saying, we haven't got enough money to pay the power, and the school board helped them out. These little steps, these little things are so important, as well as our big programs. And here's the other thing is I've been noticing in my work this year with schools is schools are reporting that teachers and leaders, their own resilience levels are down lower right now. It'll be the same in your nation. So now is not the time to expect more of teachers. Now is not the time to add more and more programs, more and more improvements. The big question is reverse planning. That is for your leaders to ask questions like this. What can we do less of so we can improve the resilience and well-being of our teachers? What can we do less of? And to actually have that as a line in your plan, this is what we're going to do less of so we can build resilience and well-being. Then we might be able to do some more initiatives. So finally, everybody, I just want to finish with some recommendations. There are so many challenges out there for us all at a broad system policy level, but also at your local level. And when I mean local, I mean just your organization, but you personally as well. So there's 3 areas at work in there, isn't there? And I guess I'm really just wanting to connect with you at a very personal level. What is it that you personally can do a little bit differently next week? Particularly around including the voices of the disadvantaged. And alongside that, it's important we don't use a one-size-fits-all approach in trying to address some of these needs. And again, you heard that from many of the speakers yesterday. So for the next 6 months, try and prioritize engaging even more with those who are at disadvantage. Go and ask them, talk to them and say, how can things be changed for you? What helps you learn? How do we need a change? We're the advantage. How do we need a change too, so that you can learn more, so it's easier for you to learn? Now, this can be challenging, but unless we do that, we're not going to see change. We can't rely on policy alone. It takes us to be part of the transformation. It's you and me being part of the transformation, not a policy, not leaving it to governments, not leaving it to just UNESCO or SEAMEO to do it, but it's you and me. And then we're going to be prepared for that for the long term. So, at least the next 10 years. Now, here's one of the little keys. Don't just rely on big solutions, but have a think about developing those local solutions. And if you do have local solutions, try not to do it so it's just you doing it to help the disadvantaged. Make sure the disadvantaged have a say in that and really listen to them, and maybe even give them some responsibility in that as well. Now, it might create a little bit of tension, but it's going to be worth it if we're going to see these barriers come down. There are other challenges like prejudice that you might encounter along the way. There might be, you might find sometimes corruption has got in the way, and sometimes unintentional ignorance, and also other historical acts that have taken power away from certain groups. And we need to restore that power or remove the barriers so they have that power again, shared with the rest of us. And folks, a word that I love using and I think means so much, be grace-filled, be full of grace and compassion, and at the same time be evidence-informed, use that data, and be socially just so that those barriers do come down. And here's a question I sometimes ask people, especially when I'm in Southeast Asia. What values do you all want to see more of in your organizations and communities in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, while you keep learning at the center? And why do we want to do that? It's for our students, it's for children, it's for adolescents and teenagers like these here. And these ones here are from Thailand and Vietnam. So that is who we're doing this for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Howard Youngs from Auckland University of Technology, New Zealand, for a very insightful keynote speech. I would like to invite some questions from participants in the Zoom as well as participants in the hall at SEAMEO Retrack. So you see that this is a very insightful presentation in which we learn about definition of inclusiveness, equity, and especially I learned a lot from the statement, inclusive leadership means radical change. Yesterday, we listened to the 8 country reports, and after that, we listened to the 3 presentations from the researchers' perspective, and from SEAMEO Sen, from Room to Read, Vietnam. And today, it's interesting that we learned from the keynote speech of Dr. Howard Youngs that as leaders of the school, we not only care about students in the school, but also those in the community, whom Dr. Howard Youngs mentioned as shadows in the city or in the town. And I know from Ms. Dr. Nga's presentation yesterday that there is a gap between the policy of the nation with the implementation or with the reality. And this morning, we learned from the keynote speech that we cannot use only one side, not using one size fits for all approach, or rely on international policy transfer. And in the keynote speech, Dr. Howard Youngs gave great examples of dealing with issues of inclusive education in New Zealand. Thank you so much for that. Once again, I wonder if there is any, may I may I invite Mr. Huam Phan from Laos BDR to have the question for Dr. Yang.
Good morning, Dr. Howard. Can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can. Good morning to you too.
Yeah, actually your speech and presentation is very interesting in terms of equitable access. My question is, do you think that we can provide equal access since the statutory, nationally, we are not equal? Like our finger, it cannot be equal, but how do you think we can provide education equitably? And I observed many years, we are trying to achieve the equitable access to education, but until now, it's still very challenges. So what's your can you elaborate again this point? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And it's such a key question. I think there's two aspects. Number one is actually going to those people who are disadvantaged and really listening to them, but not just listening to them, but actually hearing what their ideas are for making change, and then working together with them and supporting them in that. Now, along the way, that might reveal some challenges. And okay, look, for example, I know we don't want this to happen in any of our communities, but let's say that there is somebody somewhere who does not want to let go of the power they have. Maybe there's some corruption taking place. And sometimes those issues will really come to the fore when we are trying to remove these barriers. And I think, and that's where we need courage. And it's courage from the top all the way through to every single group in our societies. And this is why I say this takes decades. And we've got to be prepared to be in it for the long term. And not to lose hope. And I'm just going to use I just used the word hope, but I'm going to use the word radical hope. Radical hope with respect. So we respect those who are in authority. We respect our ancestors. We respect the cultures, and we respect our differences. And one of the key words from maybe more from a Confucius way of thinking is to really focus on how can we always stay in harmony, but not to stay in harmony where we stay quiet about issues. Staying quiet doesn't lead to harmony. It doesn't remove barriers. We need the harmony with people being truthful and listening to those who have needs. I hope that helps, but it is very challenging.
There is comments from SEAMEO red phone. I think this is a comment rather than a question. Dr. Yang, could you please take note of the comment in the chat box from SEAMEO red phone and response to the participants from SEAMEO red phone in the chat box?
Yes, I've just seen that come up now.
Yes.
So I think, look, one of the things that we can do as educators on Monday next week.
Yes.
Next week, we can go to our students and we can say, what is it that I do that helps you learn? Yeah. What is it that I'm not doing that, you know, is might help you learn? And what is it that I'm doing that is not helping you learn? And particularly to those students who are disadvantaged in some way. And then to ask them and say, how can I change as a teacher? You know, so, and they might just say, hey, can you please not tell me in front of everybody else that I'm struggling? And we don't mean to do that. And we've got to listen to those students. The other thing is sometimes language is really important. And this is where addressing students in their mother tongue, understanding if they're from different cultures, and connecting around that and making the effort to try and see things through their eyes. But there's some very straight, little simple things that can be done next week. At a whole school level, I'll give you this one illustration. In New Zealand, we focus on what's called teacher inquiry. This is where teachers inquire into their own practice. And I went to a school once where everybody was spread across 5 different classrooms. This is all the teachers, but all the leaders as well. The students weren't at school except for a very small group of students. I walk into the classroom, sit down next to, I think the principal was just behind me, and the rest of the teachers are sitting down. The teacher gets up and says, here's my inquiry question about how can I improve my feedback to students with assessments. That's been that person's focus for the year. And then the teacher sat down. To answer the question, 4 students got up. And they said, this is how I've experienced what the teacher has been trying to do. Student voice was put right at the center there. And I heard those 4 students talk about transformation to their learning. The teacher didn't get back up again at all. It wasn't about the teacher trying to say, I did this and I did that. It was all about listening to the students. But that what they put in place in that secondary school here in New Zealand, if you ask them questions, it took them about 7 or 8 years to get to that place where teachers would feel comfortable with that. So again, see, it's a long-term journey that you've got to be prepared to do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Youngs. I think this presentation opens a lot of discussion for researchers and practitioners in the field. As you can see, the question from TopMed Philippines or from Vietnam. Dr. Young, could you please take note of the questions and comments in the chat box and continue discussion in the chat box? I'm afraid that the time for this session is over, so I would like to move on to the plenary session 1. Thank you very much for your keynote speech, and thank you for active participation discussion in the chat box from participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, for plenary session 1, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Mas Sandra Tembongko, Deputy Coordinator of SEAMEO JobMed Network, to be the moderator for this session. Dr. Sandra Tembongko is the Doctor of Public Health degree holder from University of the Philippines, Manila. She is currently the Deputy Coordinator of Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, Tropical Medicine and Public Health Network, based in Bangkok, Thailand. Dr. Sandra, could you please start the plenary session 4? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Lin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 4th plenary session of this regional workshop. We are now on a second day of sharing good practices in implementing inclusive and equitable quality education. This time emphasizing the role of leadership and management. We've heard from our keynote speaker, Dr. Howard Young, from the New Zealand's perspective and culturally contextualized local practice, specifically the challenges that he shared to us in ensuring radical change in the classroom and in the local education system. But before we proceed to the presentation, allow me to give some reminders to everyone. We have only 1 hour for this session, and we have 3 speakers. If we can limit the presentation of each speaker to 15 minutes, so we can have more time for the question and answer portion. And the participants are also encouraged to raise questions through either raising their hand in the raise hand function or typing your questions in the chat box of the Zoom or the YouTube live. Please state your name, your question, and your organization, and to whom you're addressing the question, since we're going to have 3 speakers. So thank you, and without further ado, let me call our first presenter, He's presently the Research and Training Manager of SEAMEO Regional Center for Lifelong Learning. He was the coordinator of the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning regional project entitled Towards the Lifelong Learning Agenda for Southeast Asia and led the writing of its compendium. He developed the curriculum for managers of adult education centers to be launched this month by the German Adult Education Association, or DVD International, for worldwide use. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Mr. Ko Hu Fu. Mr. Fu, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. And before I begin, I would just like to review a secret. Behind the scene, yesterday afternoon, Mr. Lin came over to me and he said, well, Mr. Fu, tomorrow we need more time for the discussion. So please cut yours short. So I said, wow, what? I'm only 1.60 meters. How can I cut myself shorter? And he said, no, your presentation, cut it shorter so that we can have more time to discuss. And therefore, I have made it shorter within 15 minutes. So 15 minutes starts now. Mr. Lin said 14 minutes because 1 minute already. Yeah. Okay. So firstly, the term inclusive education is one of the most commonly heard and seen these days in conferences, in education forums, on education agendas, everywhere. When we talk about education, we talk about inclusive education. When we refer to SDG 4, we talk about inclusive education too. And therefore, it's so common that we have almost taken it for granted. We little wonder what it really means, what it actually points to in reality. And therefore, let's have a look at the definition in dictionary. Number one, the Oxford Learner's Dictionary says, inclusive means deliberately including people, things, ideas, etc., from all sections of society, point of views, etc. This definition, I think, is a bit too general. And so we move on to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, which says inclusive is of or relating to education in which students with disabilities are included with the general student population. This definition, in my opinion, again, is a bit narrow. Does inclusive include only children with disabilities? What about children from other vulnerable groups? People from the mountainous areas, from remote areas, children from ethnic minorities groups, the financially disadvantaged people, etc. So this definition seems to still exclude some groups from education. And finally, what about UNESCO? UNESCO says inclusive education is understood as the provision of high quality education in school that value the rights, equality, access, and participation of all learners. This definition is a bit ambitious. Why? Number one, we need to provide high quality education. Number two, we need to respect people or learners in terms of their rights. In this case, I assume it is the human rights as proclaimed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN in 1948. Or we have to respect their access and participation to education. So the UNESCO definition is a bit ambitious, but it is quite an ideal to reach up to. I would like to move on to some distinction between the terms. So we have talked about inclusive. Then what is the opposite of inclusive? Exclusive. So by exclusion, we means that people or children with disabilities are excluded from education. They can't go to school. They stay with their families, or they can go to, they can follow the parents to the field when the parents go.
Iniisa niya, kala nyo 1 hour yung binigay sa kanya.
No problem. And next, we have segregation. That is to say, we set up schools for children with disabilities. They are separate schools. And number 3, integration. We place these children in the same school as children without disabilities, but still they study in separate classes. And finally, maybe the most wonderful form of education is inclusion. They mingle with students, non-disabled students in a normal learning environment. So that's what we really mean by inclusive education. Placing students with disability in the same class with other students and they should receive the same education, the same treatment, but of course with some support because they need more support. And this one is very, very common because we saw this yesterday by the Singapore speaker. So we would just need to make distinction between equality and equity. By equality, we means we give the same equal support to everybody. So these students, the tall one, I mean, they have a good head start already. And now that we give them all the same treatment, he is still in the lead. That's not what we want. What about equity? We give children or learners different treatments, different supports, so that the disadvantaged one, I mean, maybe financially disadvantaged, or the ethnic minority people, so the disadvantaged one can get more support, suitable support, so that they can achieve the same level as other students. So this is what we really aim at. But reality, the last picture, that's the reality. So what I mean is that inclusive education, in my opinion, is still something of an ideology. It is so ideal, and we are moving towards it. But when can we reach it? Do we have some measures? Do we have some indicators or tools or instruments to measure and tell when our education system is really inclusive? Maybe not yet. And here I see 3 issues with the term inclusive. Number 1, I would like to quote an example of the sorority paradox. What is it? Suppose we have a heap of sand, and now we remove half of it. So what remains? Still a heap of sand. Again, we remove half of that. What do we have? A heap of sand. So we repeat the process over and over again until in the end, we have only 2 grains of sand. Do we call it a heap of sand anymore? No, no. Or conversely, I mean reverse, we move the reverse way. Now we have 1 grain of sand. Do we call it a heap of sand? No. Double that number, 2. Is that a heap of sand? No. 4? No. We just repeat that. And then there will be a time we say, oh, yes, we have a heap of sand now. So by inclusive education means we include children with the disadvantaged student. But what percentage of those students should be in our standard class, that when we can say, well, our education system is inclusive? Hard to say. So the inclusive number one is that it's difficult to say exactly when a certain system is inclusive. Number two, this leads on to what do we mean by inclusive? Do we mean only the children with disabilities? From the discourse that I have read, from the literature that I have reviewed, most are about children with disability. So it looks like, or it seems that children from other vulnerable groups are still excluded. And number three, a big issue, the social view on people with disability. What do I mean? I'm going to give you an example. Suppose we are in front of the building and we see a man in a wheelchair, a disabled man who cannot walk. So he is in a wheelchair. He's wheeling himself up a ramp into a building, just like we have the steps here to get into this hall, and there's a ramp to go up, and we feel sorry for him. So what do? We run over and give him a push. There he is. He's at the top of the ramp, and he's ready to get into the hall. In doing so, I don't think we have done something good. We feel good, but in his mind, in that person's mind, what does he think? Well, I'm useless. It's very simple, just to get into a house. I cannot do it. I have to rely on people. I am not an independent person. So what about this case? We see a man moving up a ramp, and we don't give help. Maybe this is one of the first times that he is trying to get up a ramp, so it's difficult for him. But in the end, he reached the top, and we smile at him. We thumbs up to him. Well, he feels very encouraged. He feels proud. Oh yeah, I can do the same thing as other people, just normal people. And I remember there was a man without limbs, Nikovic or something. I'm sorry because his name is so difficult to remember, to say Nikovic or something. He is without limbs, but he can still do many things that other people do, or even better than we do. Can you swim? Probably some of you cannot. He can. So those are three issues that I see with the inclusive education. And with inclusive education, we create certain values. Number one, intrinsic value, something that the person feels inside about him, and extrinsic value, the value that he can bring to society as just like other people. So for example, intrinsic value, he feels confident. Yeah, I can do this. If it's useful, well, I can help people in my family, can help society. Or extrinsic value, he has exercised his human rights, and in doing so, he can remove the discrimination in society, etc. And then here I would like to quote some interesting facts about inclusive education. So this chart gives us the percentage of children with disability around the world. And the two places where I circle, the first one is East Asia and the Pacific. The second circle is South Asia, that is where we are. And we can see that the size of the circle are the biggest. The size indicates the number of children with disability. So it means that children with disability is a big problem in our region. And this one, there was study And the finding was that if we include children with disability in the normal standard class learning environment, they achieve more. And so, for example, if you look at the first two colored bars, in those children are included in 80 to 100% of the day with other children. They achieve very high score in math and language. And if they are included, the last two bars, if they are included from 0 to 40% of the class time only, and then they study in separate classes, their achievement is lower. And here we'd like to quote Professor Thomas here, the professor of practice in learning differences at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. He says, a large body of research indicates that included students with disabilities develop stronger skills in reading and mathematics, have higher rates of attendance, they don't drop class, are less likely to have behavioral problems, they don't behave badly, and are more likely to complete secondary school than students who have not been included. As adults, students with disabilities who have been included are more likely to be enrolled in post-secondary education and to be employed or living independently, which is what we hope for. To go on, the benefits of inclusion for students with disabilities extend beyond academic. So it's not just their score, the performance in schools, in class, but other aspects of life as well. What? Results in social connection benefits, increased post-secondary education placement, and improved employment and independence outcomes. There is also evidence that participating in inclusive setting can use social and emotional benefits. Just wonderful. They don't, when they are included in the same class, they get from a young age, they are not discriminated, then they feel that they are just like any other children. And also, other children, when they play with these children from a young age, they will not form a certain bias against these children. And therefore, when they grow up and go to work, they do not distinguish. They make no distinction between a person, a normal person. I'm sorry to use the normal person because people will think that normal here means the mental power, a person without disabilities and the person with disability. At that time, if they could study together from a young age, when they grow up, they will have no discrimination. I would like to go on to the last red line. Again, there is a positive correlation between social and emotional benefits and proportion of the school day spent in general education classrooms. So here is another chart which shows the benefits of inclusive education. Children in inclusive education are less likely to receive a disciplinary referral. That is, they behave better. Number two, they're more likely to belong to a school group. Number three, more likely to have a competitive employment in the future when they graduate from school or university. And they're more likely to live independently. So those are the wonders of inclusive education. When I say wonders, I mean they are just fabulous and which we aim for. And finally, just to very quick, I will refer to a case in Hà Giang, a province, a mountainous province in Vietnam. There, 87% of the populations are ethnic minority groups. And we know that ethnic people do not send their children to school. They normally take their children to the field to work with them, to learn to work with them. And here, a center in Hà Giang try to include students, those ethnic minority children in education by organizing classes, STEM classes, by using very simple material that they can find in the locality. For example, they teach those students geometry, shapes, and they say, well, the geometric shape of a house is rectangular, triangle, etc. And then they show the children how to make the model of houses using the stick only, because they live in the countryside. There are a lot of sticks there, etc. So this is a wonderful example of including children from ethnic minority groups into education, attracting them in learning. To conclude, and not to conclude, this is my final thought. From what I have read, I just tentatively build up a model of inclusive education. Inclusive education is based on 4 bases. It's built on 4 bases. Number 1, governance. Number 2, legislation policies. And number 3, practice. Number 4, stakeholders. By governance, I don't just mean the governments from the central governments down to the local government. It is within the school itself. The managers manage the school. How the manager create a learning environment where there is no discrimination. And then legislation policies. Does the government have any policies enabling, facilitating policies to help those children? And number 3, practice. How do we put this into practice? Does a teacher have the skill, the methodology to teach those children a mixed class, in a mixed class? And then finally, stakeholders. Does the school liaise with other stakeholders in society, parents, communities, to tap their resources for example, for finance, and build up programs for the school. So with that, I would like to end my presentation, and thank you very much for your listening. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fu, for a conceptual discourse of inclusive education and how the concept of inclusive education is actually implemented in a province in Vietnam. Just a gentle reminder to our speaker, please consider the time limit. Yeah? Our next presenter is a learning designer and facilitator of SEAMEO Innotech's Learning Development and Management Office. She's the course manager for the pilot offering of the Southeast Asian School Leadership Program, which was designed, developed, and delivered in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. She's a holder of a master's degree in instructional design and technology. Her area of expertise include learning design and facilitation, organization and human resources development, competency development and management, and project management. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Ms. Michelle C. Sarabillo. Ms. Sarabillo, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sandra, for the kind introduction. And good morning to everyone, to our esteemed guests and everyone who's watching us via YouTube Live. Warmest greetings to all of you. I'm very, very grateful and honored to have this opportunity to share with you what we've been doing at SEAMEO Innotech, and in particular, talk about the Southeast Asian School Leadership Program, CSLP, Leading Schools in Uncertain Times, which is a leadership course, as mentioned by Dr. Sandra, designed, developed, and delivered during the first year of the global pandemic. CSLP, I'd say, is an innovation that strives to embody the principles of inclusion and equity in its learning design and implementation so that it can help school heads to navigate through these challenging times. So here's the outline of my presentation. I will start with our why, the reasons why we're giving focus to school leadership. Then I will deep dive into CSLP. I'll talk you through the details of the program, its theoretical underpinnings, principles, structures, strategies, and desired outcomes. I will also share with you what we have achieved so far, albeit very modest, and what we're seeing as future possibilities. So here, I'd like to start here by outlining why we're focusing on school leadership. While research and common knowledge point to the importance of school leadership in improving the outcomes of schools and students, school leadership is second only to teaching, to classroom instruction among all school-related factors that contribute to what students learn at school. Most recent research is actually suggesting that we may not have stated strongly enough the value of school leadership, because if we look at it, school principals' impact is larger in scope because it covers all students in an entire school, not just the classroom. Wallace Foundation's research says effective school leaders' impact goes beyond student achievement. It directs instructional conversations and interactions with teachers. It builds positive school climate. It facilitates collaborative and professional learning communities, and it directs strategic personnel and resource management processes. So yeah, I think we can all agree undoubtedly that school leadership is very, very critical, and its importance has been greatly emphasized when the pandemic happened and tilted the world upside down. When COVID-19 pandemic unleashed disruption of massive scale and scope, school leaders were put under enormous pressure to lead through the changes and uncertainties. So with the school closures, the health and safety problems, the limited resources, the ever-changing government pronouncements and protocols that impact teaching and learning, and other issues, school leaders had to make sure that student learning continued, that teachers were well prepared and motivated, and that the parents and other members of the community were involved, among so many other things on their plate. And while the situation was, and I believe still is, fluid, the expectation for them to act and inspire action has been very, very high, and without any playbook or precedents to refer to at that. So here's our response. Because as I've outlined, those are the reasons, those are the reasons why we're putting much weight on school leadership. And essentially, that was the backdrop when we developed CSLP in 2020. Those information plus the data that we've collected from the learning needs assessment and conversations that we've conducted among school leaders shape the program as it is now. But let me emphasize that CSLP is one of Inotech's contributions to SDG, or Sustainable Development Goal number 4 target of ensuring quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for school leaders in Southeast Asia. It is very much aligned with SEAMEO priority agenda outlined by Dr. Valenzuela in her presentation yesterday. CSLP also recognizes the role that school leaders play in developing qualified teachers and preparing learners for the future. The program is an innovation attuned to the needs of school leaders who are navigating their way through the turbulence and difficulties of this global crisis. So let me now share with you the underpinnings of CSLP. As you can see here, CSLP is anchored on the competency framework that Inotech co-developed with the different ministries of education in Southeast Asia. It highlights the 5 most essential competencies of high-performing school heads in the region. And these competencies are strategic thinking and innovation, managerial leadership, instructional leadership, stakeholder engagement, and personal excellence. In the program, these competencies are tackled against the background of the pandemic and the changes that are happening in learning and education. globally, regionally, and nationally. In the second bullet, you'll see that CSLP is a 10-week scholarship program that we offer to school principals and vice principals in the region. It's a practitioner-oriented course that recognizes school leaders as adult learners who bring wealth of experiences and expertise into the learning space. The tagline of CSLP is leading schools in uncertain times. Because when we don't know exactly what is going to work yet, we need to have people close to the ground. In this case, the school principals, together with their teachers and other members in the community, to innovate, to iterate, and make sensible adaptations as they gather inspiration and evidence about what works and what doesn't. So how do we do that? We have CSLP's learning design principles that allow and facilitate that kind of learning experience to happen. Dr. Young earlier touched upon some of these earlier in his presentation. So the first one, CSLP emphasizes reflection as an important leadership skill. In the program, we have reflective checkpoints that are interspersed all throughout the course. And these provide opportunities for school leaders to recall stories about overcoming challenges. They also have the opportunity to enumerate practical tools and strategies that they have developed or used, as well as innovations that are currently working in their school communities. We also say that in CSLP, we honor the different perspectives and experiences of school leaders. To a great extent, it's the reflective nature of the program that allows diversity and inclusion and also celebrate everyone's voice and choice. I did mention that the program is a practitioner-oriented course, so we recognize the different experiences and expertise of the participants. So while CSLP offers frameworks, we offer, of course, concepts, tools, and we even feature resource persons or experts. The program does not prescribe one single solution. The voice of experts, they serve as triggers or catalysts for deeper reflection and discussions. Because as we all know, and as pointed out by Dr. Young earlier, solutions are highly contextual and situational. And we think that the school heads, the school leaders are in the best position to identify and decide which ones would work well for them and their schools. What CSLP provides are perspectives, options, guidance, alternatives, and possibilities. The third principle there, CSLP subscribes to strengths-based philosophy. So rather than focusing on problems and deficits, which the world have so much more of, we try to reframe and locate what are working well in the schools. So we craft the reflective questions that are life-giving. We also curate the same materials for them and produce the same materials to inspire and encourage school heads to seek out opportunities. We create multiple touch points. In CSLP, we try to replicate the interaction and connection that happens in person online. And that is a very, very important, excuse me. We combine self-paced and synchronous sessions and use different platforms and tools to meet our learners wherever they are in their learning journey and ensure engagement. We also strive to practice empathy and flexibility in the program in all aspects of the course, in the live talks, in the asynchronous sessions, in their submission of assignments. We try to understand, where our school leaders are coming from and what they're experiencing right now. Empathy for us also means that, us striving to simplify the course, the contents of the course. So we try to simplify it, de-jargonize it, we make it as practical as possible. And these, as I said, we try to embody in all aspects of the program. So here, this illustration is what I meant by multiple touch points. We use different platforms, tools, and strategies to make sure that our participants are learning and, of course, are engaged all throughout the program, even when it's fully online. So in the middle, you will see that's the Moodle icon, because that's what we're using for our iFlex, or the InnoText Flexible Learning Management System, where all our learning materials are uploaded and can be accessed. For the live talks, we use Zoom as our platform, but for the country level talks, we give them the liberty to decide which platform is most accessible or convenient to them. So most of them would use MS Teams, Google Meet, and Messenger Room. They've also set up their own group chats to stay connected. And what we have discovered is that for Brunei, Indonesia, and Malaysia, it's WhatsApp that's most popular. It's Telegram for Cambodia, Messenger for Myanmar, Philippines, and Thailand. And for Vietnam, it's Zalo. So due to the pandemic, more and more we're realizing just how important digital skills are. And so by design, we build our school leaders' level of comfort and competence in using technology for learning and engagement. Again, in the program, we strive for learning experiences that build confidence and connection. So in CSLP, just like in most online programs, we combine self-paced and synchronous sessions. We create individual and group assignments, exercises, and tools that are practical and can be applied immediately. And as mentioned earlier, we invite school leaders to go back to their individual and collective practices and experiences via the reflective checkpoints, the country-level discussions, and inter-country discussions. And because the school principals come into this space not knowing each other, we really had to build a safe and caring space where everyone could be open enough to tell their stories of successes and failures and share their most honest ideas and thoughts. So we put a lot of effort in incorporating multiple touch points, check-ins, interactions, and collaborative work. So we also optimize the use of Facebook and other social media platforms in engaging them. In the program, we provide regular feedback. We have peer-to-peer feedback and feedback coming from the country coaches, country facilitators, and the program management team. We always say that feedback is a gift that, and we try to generously give feedback so generously and lots of care during the program. And lastly, we offer variety to support the different learning styles and preferences of participants. And here we leverage on available technology. Accompanying our school leaders in the entire learning journey are country coaches. So they are officials from the Ministry of Education or our school heads themselves. They serve as facilitators during the country level live talks, or even during the whole crew live talks. They help contextualize, deepen, and translate concepts and discussions into school level strategies and actions. The country facilitators also tackle concerns on language, translation. Of course, we want to make sure that they are supported all throughout. And even in the submission of assignments, they are with us in sustaining the engagement of our participants all throughout the program. So yeah, I think we've mentioned, we've heard several times just how the pandemic affected us. And us here at Innotech, it compelled the center to change the way its SEDF program is being delivered from blended approach to fully online. And CSLP is actually showing the benefits and promise of online development programs as low cost, far-reaching, and high scalability strategy to school leadership preparation and development. And with a fully online delivery, Innotech is able to double the number of scholars participants from each SEAMEO member country. In the past, we could only invite 3 school heads because we had to fly them in the country. But now we can invite as many as 6 from each country for each run. CSLP was actually offered in January 2021, and to date we've completed 4 batches already, and we're very happy to note of the outcomes that we are seeing right now. Enhancement of the school leaders mastery level in the 5 competencies from novice or apprentice level. When they started, they are now practitioner and even expert at some or on some of the competencies at the end of the program, with the different activities and assignments that they needed to try out or implement in the school and experiment with their teachers. We are able to help facilitate the weaving of the lessons of this pandemic into the regular school systems and processes. In the program, school heads are also able to create prototypes around a strategic priority of the school that they themselves have identified. On top of this, they've developed collaborative projects together with other school leaders from other countries. And some of the projects are organizing regular check-ins and learning sessions among them, facilitating online knowledge sharing among their teachers, student-to-student exchange via online, and other simple, doable projects. And with these collaborative projects that school leaders from different countries are working on, we hope to build a community of school leaders in the region who are solving problems together, building on one another's ideas, sharing notes, and moving forward having learned what works best. So yes, let me also share that just yesterday, we graduated the 3rd batch of regional CSLP. Since we offered it last year, we were able to complete 4 runs. I did mention that. 3 regional runs and 1 country offering in partnership with NIE Cambodia. The country offering in Indonesia is in the works. We hope, yes, we really hope to work and partner with the different MOEs and SEAMEO centers in implementing CSLP that is contextualized and customized based on the country's needs. That would be truly, truly exciting. So moving forward, CSLP will continue to adapt to the changing landscape of learning and education, and innovate in collaboration, of course, with the different key partners and stakeholders. It will carry on with its mission of journeying with school leaders and creating value for them as they navigate their way through these challenging times. We hope to grow and inspire more school leaders who will champion inclusive and equitable quality education in Southeast Asia, honoring what they've learned and experienced in the program. So yes, that ends my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Arabilio, Michelle, for sharing with us our innovative online development program of SEAMEO Innotech can actually respond to school leadership development needs in the region efficiently and effectively. As you said, the benefit and the promise of this online development program for school leaders is really very evident. So thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to remind our participants to type their questions at the chat box of Zoom or YouTube. Again, please type your name, your organization, and to whom you want the question to be addressed. So now, may we call on our last speaker for this session. She's a senior education specialist from SEAMEO Track. She has been the Dean of the Faculty and Academic Affairs of FINMA Cagayan de Oro College in the Philippines from 2015 to 2017. She holds a doctorate degree in educational planning and management. Our speaker is committed to advance educational leadership and management for improved student outcomes. Her research interests include curriculum development and assessment, teaching strategies, teacher education, student learning assessment, remote teaching and learning, and hybrid teaching. Our speaker and her team just recently published a research paper entitled Job Satisfaction of Basic Education Teachers in Southeast Asia, the Issues and Recommendations. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Anita Clapano Oblina. Dr. Oblina, the virtual floor is yours.
Dr. Sandra, thank you so much for your kind introduction. A very good morning, everyone. On behalf of SEAMEO Retract Research Team, I am pleased to introduce to you our ongoing research project entitled, I'm sorry.
We can hear you.
Okay, am I okay now?
Yeah.
Again, Dr. Sandra, thank you so much for your kind introduction. And a very good morning, everyone. On behalf of SEAMEO Retract Research Team, I am pleased to introduce our ongoing research titled Enhancing Inclusive and Equitable Quality Education in Southeast Asia through Innovative Educational Leadership Management. This is an inter-center collaborative project of SEAMEO centers. The presentation includes the following: rationale, research objectives, research questions, significance of the study, conceptual framework, method and data collection, expected results. The rationale of the study. This research project is in line with the SDG goal for quality education with its full title, Ensure Inclusive and Equitable Quality Education and Promote Lifelong Learning Opportunities for All. It is one among the 17 Sustainable Development Goals established by the United Nations in September 2015. The implementation of SDG 4 since its declaration has remained a major challenge for education systems, particularly in developing countries. This is pronounced by the UN Sustainable Development Goal Reports 2018 and 2021, respectively. According to the 2018 UN Sustainable Development Goal Report on SDG 4, after 3 years of implementation, still more than half of children and adolescents worldwide are not meeting minimum proficiency standards in reading and mathematics. More trained teachers are needed for quality education. This is highlighted by the 2021 UN Sustainable Development Goal Report on SDG 4. The report declares that the too slow progress to achieve Goal 4 by 2030 has been given a halt by the COVID-19 pandemic. Large disparities in school completion are likely to get worse, especially among poor or vulnerable children. Exceptional measures are needed to get students back on track after a catastrophic year for education. The critical reality suggests an in-depth study of the multifaceted problem relative to inclusive and equitable quality education confronting the Southeast Asia region. This strongly motivates us to push this study forward with the collaboration of SEAMEO standards. This study focuses on innovative approaches, strategies, and practices by school leaders and administrators in implementing policies to enhance inclusive and equitable quality education in Southeast Asia region. Based on the focus of the study, the research team formulated the research objectives as follows: to investigate the realities of inclusive and equitable quality education in Southeast Asia, to explore the policies that have been issued and the innovative approaches and practices that school leaders, administrators, and teachers have used to implement these policies, to examine the best practices and lessons learned identified by the school leaders, administrators, and teachers, and to provide innovative solutions and policy recommendations to inform policy decisions. Then we translated these research objectives into research questions. What are the realities of inclusive and equitable quality education in Southeast Asia? What policies have been issued and what leadership and management innovations have been undertaken to promote inclusive and equitable quality education in the region? And what are the best practices and lessons learned to enhance inclusive and equitable quality education in Southeast Asia through educational leadership and management? After putting the aforementioned in place, we critically thought of the significance of this study, and we came up with the following. The study can be useful to teachers, school leaders, and administrators, for it will present valuable information on the realities of inclusive and equitable quality education in Southeast Asia, which could be used as a blueprint to move forward. Moreover, the study can be useful to school leaders and policymakers, for it will provide innovative approaches, best practices, and lessons learned derived from the study that can be utilized within their context, and policy recommendations that might be considered in the policy decision-making process that can be made available across Southeast Asian countries. Finally, the study can be useful to academicians and researchers as it adds to the list of existing literature, and they can use the findings to further research on the subject. With that in mind, we proceeded to the conceptual framework of the study. It took us time to identify the conceptual framework, for we could not find one that we could adapt for this study. Hence, we conducted a thorough review about inclusive, equitable, quality education in Southeast Asia and beyond. We took note of the themes, concepts, constructs that recur excessively in literature, in studies, in reports like national, international reports such as United Nations, UNESCO, UNICEF, World Bank, among others. The reviews guide us to design a conceptual framework of the study. This is our conceptual framework. As illustrated in the conceptual framework, we have the 4 domains: school policies, teaching and learning, teachers, and educational facilities. And each domain has several constructs as follows. School policies domain, we have policy on equity, inclusivity, policy on equity, policy on quality, and policy on partnerships. teaching and learning domain, we have curriculum, instruction, assessment, academic support. Teachers domain, we have qualified teachers, professional development, and educational facilities domain, we have learning environment, working conditions, and resources. Now, each construct has sample of items to explain the construct being measured that will be found in our survey questionnaire. So the framework demonstrates the convergence and the interdependence of the 4 domains: school policies, teaching and learning, teachers, and educational facilities, which are critical to enhance inclusive and equitable quality education through innovative educational leadership and management. Now we move to the next slide, and this is about method and data collection. We have decided to use the mixed methods approach, a design in which qualitative and quantitative data are collected in parallel, analyzed separately, and then merged. The method allows us the comparison of different perspectives drawn from quantitative and qualitative data. The tools that we are using are survey, questionnaire, group discussion, and document analysis. Qualitative data are collected from expert forum, as we are doing now, which will be followed by group discussion. And then interview will take soon. And then the document analysis will be taken by the research team. Quantitative data are collected from online survey. And I would like to emphasize that the data that we are going to collect will be coming from the Southeast Asian countries. Respondents of the online survey are school-based teachers, school leaders and administrators, and policymakers in basic education. The schools participating in the study are primary schools, lower secondary schools / junior high schools, upper secondary schools / senior high schools, and they may be private and public schools, and in urban, rural, and remote areas. For data analysis, we're going to use SPSS software for quantitative data and thematic analysis for qualitative data. The expected outputs of the study are in twofold. The first fold covers with a report on policies, best practices, lessons learned, and shared innovative approaches in educational leadership and management on the focus areas. And the second fold includes concrete outputs. So the first fold are as follows: policies to enhance inclusivity, equity, and quality in basic education in Southeast Asia, strategies to improve teaching and learning through innovative curriculum, instruction, assessment, and academic support, policies to continually train teachers and to provide continuous teacher professional development in enhancing inclusive and equitable quality education in the region, and strategies to improve educational facilities such as working conditions, learning environment, and resources as important factors supporting inclusive and equitable quality education. The second fold are as follows: list of innovative solutions generated from challenges, approaches, best practices, and lessons learned derived from the study, and list of policy recommendations to inform policy decisions, a policy brief, and research articles for journal publications. I just described to you our ongoing research project, enhancing inclusive and equitable quality education in Southeast Asia through innovative educational leadership and management. I hope this research has given you some ideas, thoughts, and insights. I would like to end my presentation with a few thoughts. The research project is currently collecting data. Data collection is always a challenging process, especially when respondents are from various countries with diverse languages and working styles. With this concern, we are seeking the support and cooperation of SEAMEO centers to help us in data collection. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Oblina, for sharing with us the progress of an inter-center collaborative research project. We look forward to hearing the results of this research project. At this point, we're now opening the Q&A portion of this session. May we request our speakers to please turn on your camera and microphone for the Q&A session. May we call on Michelle, Dr. Oblina, and Dr. Hu? Dr. Fu. Dr. Fu is around. We're calling on our participants from YouTube channel to type your questions. We have one question here at the chat box. And I think this can be answered by all our speakers. What is the best and recommendable strategy in teaching learning process to attain equitable quality education? This came from Ms. Villas Ruby. I think she's from the Philippines. So yeah, that's right. Maybe we can also hear from our keynote speaker, and then the panelists can also respond to the question. I think this is addressed to everyone. Dr. Howard, can you start first?
Yes, I think, and I'll just stress that one point that I made that has been through data has been shown to make a difference to student achievement. That is to ask the students what helps them learn. And that second part, for teachers to question their own assumptions around students. For example, if you've got people in your school who are already saying, oh, that student will do vocational education. Oh, that student will do university. That means we've already made our minds up about those students. That's an assumption that has to be challenged, because otherwise we will not break down the challenges, and we'll still keep getting the same students going to university, the same students going to vocational education. It's attitudes like that we need to be aware of in ourselves and in our schools particularly. So that's the one to do with attitudes. And then, as I said, the other one is for teachers very specifically to ask the students, what do I do that helps you learn? And what else can I do to help you learn? Now, as I said, in New Zealand, the data around, particularly for our Indigenous Māori students who were involved in this program with the teachers, they found the student achievement improved because of those two main factors.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Can we hear from Michelle?
Yes, I would like to respond to that from a learning designer's perspective. And I would like to go back to how we're developing our programs. And it's really talking to your teachers, like in doing capacity building programs, you really need to understand what their needs are, because it cannot be like, as mentioned, I think earlier, it cannot be a one-size-fits-all learning design. So I think the data is very, very important when we are designing our programs. And also, I think more than the content, we also have to balance it with the processes. Our teachers, our school heads, our participants should be able to experience when we say empathy, how does it look like? How is it being applied? So our programs should be very practical and something that can be applied immediately. So that for me, I hope that, can respond to the question given.
Thank you, Michelle. Can we now hear from Dr. Oblina?
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Thank you so much for that question. I'd like to share my piece about it. Now, I think in my experience and in my I would say readings, I would say that one strategy to be able to help students to implement inclusive, equitable, quality education is know my students. I should know my students who they are, where they come from, what are their levels of competency. Knowing my students would be able to help me differentiate my instruction, differentiate my activities, differentiate my assessment. And it's there then that I would like to go to what Dr. Yang mentioned, that what I am doing, what do you want me to do to help you learn better? What is it that I am doing that you learn, and what is it not that I am not doing, that, you know? So it is then really a connection. As a teacher, for me, there must be really a connection between me and my students. It is only there then that I know their needs, I know who they are, and I can, as I said earlier, differentiate my content, my instruction, my assessment, and my other things, no? Be able to enhance their learning capacity, just to make them, you know, inspired to learn more and to achieve more. I hope I have given my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oblina. Can we hear from Mr. Fu? I think Mr. Fu is in the audience. I saw him sitting. Your insights, Mr. Fu, about the question? Mr. Fu.
Sorry, no response from Mr. Fu. Dr. Sandra.
Okay. Okay. Now, just a follow up to this to the discussion about the teaching learning process. No, one of the really what came out is talking to the students in the classroom. What really makes learning for them easier and more relevant. No, but what should be in place so that we can provide the teachers an enabling environment so that the teachers can actually do this process? So any thoughts from our speakers?
Yeah, look, one of the things that it does need to be tied to is a teacher's desire to learn. And so rather than send teachers away on lots of training courses, we actually need to equip them to have what we call their own teacher inquiries into their own practice, which are then molded to suit their students that they work with. So a whole school can do teacher inquiries. But then one of the key things is for the leaders to actually do leadership inquiries about how they can best support teachers with their inquiries. And the teacher inquiries are inquiring into how can I change my teaching to help my students learn more.
Okay, so we really need the support of the leaders. Michelle, can you add to that?
Yes, actually, I was also about to say that this is where school leadership becomes very, very critical because they provide the right environment for our teachers. And just like what Dr. Young said, it's not enough that we send them to training. You know, there are so many ways by which we can provide assistance to our teachers, like coaching, for example, is one. Building a strong school-based professional learning community is another. Teachers helping teachers, leaders, you know, coming in whenever the leader is needed, and so I think more of these should be nurtured at the school level, and I hope to see, you know, more confidence on our teachers, because if that is built, I think they are more equipped to handle the problems or the situation that they're facing now.
Thank you, Michelle. Any insights from Dr. Oblina? Is this part of the research? What should be in place to enable the teachers to have this, to inquire about the students' requirement for learning?
Yeah,
Dr. Abrina?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Now, in addition to what Dr. Young's mentioned and also Dr. Sarabillo mentioned about really developing our teachers and professional development, I think another important area that will also be considered is the resources, like especially now, like materials. You know, our teachers having these materials that they are going to use, especially in inclusive education, because we have varied, diverse needs of students. Are there supports, you know, that the teachers are having within the school context? Is the room provided with the facilities that the teacher needs to be able to maximize the teaching learning process of the students? And now we have the technology is added to the list. Our teachers trained, you know, in digital world, you know, to be able really to also deliver, you know, and influence students to be better learners and to achieve the learning outcomes of the optimum, I would say. So I guess these are the things, you know, that we are going to. And aside from that, there must also be like partnerships, school partnerships with the parents, very important. School partnerships with the community. We have the students under community, we have the NGOs and other community organizations out there, and also the partnership of school to another schools, you know, because they can have the conversation. They have the dialogue on what are the realities that we are confronting now, and how are we going to, you know, address this and enhance together with work. I mean, these are my insights, and thank you so much.
Dr. Fu, is there something from Dr. Fu? Okay, if there's no more comments.
Sandra,
Yes.
could I just add just one thing
Yeah,
to that? And I
sure.
think it's an important thing for us to recognize that in some nations, in some areas, teachers already are working at full capacity. And for some teachers in some regions, they have a second job, like tutoring after school. And so they're already exhausted because they need to get some more money in for their families. So when we talk about teacher development, we have to be also thinking about their workload. And so then that means that for school leaders and also for system leaders and policy leaders is to ask the question, how can we lighten the workload of our teachers, but maybe also pay them a bit more as well, so then they don't go looking for a second job. So we need to create the space for teachers to be able to grow and develop as well. At the moment, in some places, that might be very challenging for some teachers. And I just want to acknowledge people who are in those situations.
Thank you, Dr. Young. That's really very important to consider that it's not just within the teachers. The challenges and the barriers are not just on the teacher's side. There's a whole gamut of factors that will enable the teacher to do this. So any other comments from our participants in the Zoom and in the YouTube?
Dr. Sandra, after this session, we will have a discussion session. So
okay.
In this session over here. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's time to wrap up this session. So we would like to thank our keynote speaker and the panel for this plenary session. Our participants will definitely bring home a lot of key messages so that we can really start, as Dr. Young said, start tomorrow or on Monday. Slowly, the radical change that we want to achieve. And we know that there's something that will help in terms of capacity building. There's the INNOTech program. And then there's also, if we want data evidence on how to really improve the state of the art of inclusive education, we're waiting for the results of the inter-center collaboration. And we definitely can really clarify our definition of inclusive education from the conceptual discourse of Dr. Fu. So thank you very much for listening and for joining us in this plenary session. Good day to everyone.
Thank you very much, the speakers, and thank you very much, Dr. Sandra from SEAMEO JobMed Network Thailand for moderating the session and raising interesting questions for discussion. We will come back with the discussion session after the break. So now may I invite all of you to please take a break for 15 minutes. For participants on YouTube Live, could you return after 11? Thank you very much and enjoy your break. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the final session of the workshop. And this is the discussion session. Next slide, please. Mr. Lin, next slide, please. In the discussion session, I would like to give some discussion notes. You are going to discuss in 30 minutes with the same discussions question for 2 groups in the whole SEAMEO retract and 3 groups in the Zoom platform. Zoom participants are randomly divided into 3 breakout rooms, and face-to-face participants are divided into 2 groups. After your discussion, to begin your discussion, please nominate a group leader to moderate the discussion, both in Zoom and as face-to-face participants at SEAMEO retract, and nominate a reporter to take notes and a representative to present after the discussion. The presentation summarizing key ideas of the group discussion should be limited in about 5 minutes because we have 5 groups, so just 5 minutes for presentation. 30 minutes will start from now with the same, next slide please, with the same discussion question. 1, what best practices, experience and/or stories about enhancing inclusive and equitable quality education in your context that you want to share? 2, what are current problems in ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education that you observe? This can be students with disabilities, gender equity, minor ethnic students, economically disadvantaged students, gifted students, etc., either at the regional, national, local, or school context. And 3, what are innovative solutions in terms of educational leadership and management to solve the problems that you observe? Now, I would like to invite the tech team to please break the Zoom participants into 3 random breakout sessions. We will discuss until 11:15. Thank you very much. Okay. BIT, could you end the breakout session in the Zoom platform? Participant in the hall, could you please just turn around for those who are sitting back to the stage? Could you please turn around to listen to the presentations from participants in the Zoom and be ready to nominate a representative to briefly summarize your discussion. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your active participation in the group discussion, both for participants in the hall SEAMEO retract and participants in the Zoom platforms. Now we have about 30 minutes for presentation. Actually, it's just a summary of key ideas of your discussion. First of all, may I invite a representative from breakout room number 1 in the Zoom platform to please present the key ideas of your discussion. Breakout room number 1.
Judy, would you like to present on behalf of the group?
Are we number 1, Michelle?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Do we have the presentation, or I will just pick up whatever we have just discussed?
I will share.
Whatever you find it convenient for you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So thank you so much for the opportunity. We are happy to be placed in group 1. We like to meet new friends from SEAMEO sister, but also we have Dr. Yen and also Mr. Homfan in the group. So based on our sharing, this is what we feel as some best practices that we share based on the Vietnam experience from Rainbow Foundation. We learn some trainings of leaders on the principle of inclusive education as well as promotion of inclusive education. And then from RECFON, we have training on nutrition goes to school. And just recently, the challenge that we have of having a program basically cultivated in Indonesian setting, and now we are thinking to bring that in the region. The issue with the translation and also the context of Cambodia was addressed, and there was a discussion on some innovation on how to deal with that. From Inotech, there has been also a lot of learnings, for example, on the designs, learning design, which the principles embodied the inclusion and diversities. And then the assignment of introducing the training outside the region is actually by having some country coaches, which is also an interesting move that we could probably replicate. And then the leverage on the available technology, the use of Google Translate, which is now getting better and better, and that is helpful. And then the use of LMS for the integration of the translated software that we are using. From Lao, I think the sharing from Mr. Homfan is really on the commitment of the government of Lao on making sure that inclusion education is being implemented. I think that's the first slide, and then these are the challenges. When we discuss about inclusion education, we discuss how sometimes we focus more on the academic performance rather than the overall being of the students. We need to find ways on how to make sure these two are working together. It was also discussed the point of mental health of the teachers being an issue. We need also to be able to find ways on how to address this. The physical accessibility of the facilities is something that we need also to discuss. And in Lao, there is a concern on the definition of terminology, whether we would go for inclusive education or we will still be using this spatial education. And there has been also a need actually to redefine or make to define this direction in relation to inclusive education. I think that's the last slide. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zudia Suti from SEAMEO RegFund Indonesia. In a very short time, you make a PowerPoint presentation to summarize key ideas of the discussion. That's interesting, especially you also raise some challenges and solutions to the issues. Next, I would like to invite a representative from from Breakout session number 2 in the Zoom platform to please summarize the key ideas of your discussion.
Hello, good morning. I assume I'm from Breakout Room 2 because I forgot what number we were at, but we had a very interesting discussion with Dr. Young's joining us, and we have friends from SPAFA, RegFond, and SIACA, as well as a Vietnamese friend who joined us as well to discuss how to really take concrete steps to move in engaging our disadvantaged students and providing inclusive education. One of the key learning that we also drew from Dr. Young's presentation earlier was the need for cultural sensitivity and to be able to meet the ethnic minorities where they are instead of asking them to come to where we are. And that includes going out to the community to engage them, sitting down with the community leaders and understanding their philosophy, their views, and work with them to support the children in their community. For many of our friends who joined us, I think they were very interested to hear what were some of the good strategies and good practices. And I took the opportunity to share in this aspect how we have done it at Singapore. For example, instead of expecting the ethnic minorities to just come into our schools and know how we teach our students and expect all students to adapt to the mainstream education system, we cultivated and trained a pool of befrienders to go out to the families, engage with the parents, befriend them, and walk that journey with them to identify their needs, speak to them about the future of their children, and give them encouragement and support along the way. So by putting our befrienders out in the community with the families, we felt that that was a more culturally sensitive way than to expect them to just come and follow what we have in our rules and policies and systems. So that's just a very simple example. But Dr. Young's also encouraged us not to just look at what others are doing and to have faith and confidence in what we have. For example, in our rural areas with our schools, the expertise, the experience, and the knowledge is already there. And so he ended off encouraging us to have faith in what we know and to have the confidence to do something about it. So that's a very short summary from our group discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kong Hong Ong from Singapore Ministry of Education for summarizing the key ideas of discussion from your group. You know, it's a pity that in the conference we didn't have a specific presentation about ethnic minority group. Actually, we had one, but then the a speaker, cancel the presentation in the last minutes. However, in your discussion, it's interesting that you raised the issue again, students, ethnic minority students, and this is, a very good addition to the discussion of this workshop. And now, may I invite the representative from group number 3 in the breakout sections, breakout rooms, to present your key ideas.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning and afternoon in Brunei. I guess I'm representing group 3, which is keep on appearing and disappearing. So we start off with 2 participants in the breakout room, and then now we end up with, I believe, was 4 members in that group. Anyway, for question number 1, we talked about our best practices. So we have actually discussed that we have agreed upon parents play an important role in shaping the path of the children. So this is one of the group that we to focus on with regards to empowering them with knowledge and skills, even during the pandemic. So we need to empower the parents to be able to train or to empower their own children to be independent, no matter what the stage is, or whether it's primary or secondary. So we should focus on the current or tangible program, could be a monthly training, webinars that support the parents. All right. So with regards to the issues that we've discussed, all right, we have quite a number of issues that we discussed upon from Vietnam. Problem is always on the facilities and learning material for students with disabilities, and the number of students in class is very big, around 50 to 60 students per classroom, and then quite difficult for teachers to take care of individual needs and improve the conditions of teaching for learning to prosper. Right, and similar issue in our country. We lack, as already mentioned during my presentation, we lack of special educators needs in Brunei. So we also have a school in a ratio of 1:30 teachers and students, and then the issue is a prolonged issue. So we cannot get to recruit new special education needs teachers, and then there's also small numbers of teachers in this area looking for short-term measures that we already mentioned yesterday, where we actually train non-special educational need teachers to provide extra support in schools. And then from Malaysia, we talked about shortage of special education needs teachers, and then they were suggesting have the policy in place and have the pre-service courses, and then but they actually do train a lot of new teachers, but the issue comes with the placement of the teachers is always a mismatch. At the end of the day, they are not really looking after the special educational needs. So we need to execute the policy. Executing the policy is a great challenge as well. So lastly, we actually discuss on some sort of ideas, what we think innovative solution to the issue is, as I already mentioned, to train the non-special educational needs teachers to render extra support, okay, rather than wait for the next cohort of graduates. Right, and then we can also leverage on digital platform to expedite the learning process, right? And then we can also repurpose the existing technologies rather than specifically on a special educational needs assistive technologies to support the special education and needs students in terms of the learning. And then Dr. Hanani also mentioned about there is no particular curriculum for low functioning student. So need to have a group of innovative teachers with ideas, creative enough to think out of the box and share their best practices they have done in the classroom. And then from Vietnam, lastly, we talked about society resources and support, need more support from private sectors and scale up for the whole country. Right, I think that's all that we can come up with during the discussion. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eddie Fasin from Ministry of Education, Brunei Darussalam, for summarizing key ideas of your group discussion. Although the country reports and the presentation at the workshop trying to cover various issues of inclusive and equitable quality education, however, I think that the voices from the discussion is a valuable addition to the discussion of the workshop. Thank you for sharing the issues and solution in Malaysia, Brunei Darussalam. And now we would like to hear the voice from a Vietnam higher education institution from group number 1. May I invite Ms. Huế from An Giang University, representing group 1 in the whole SEAMEO retract to summarize the key ideas of your discussion. Come here. Mr. Huế, please come to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. So I would like to share some ideas in our group when we discussed the problem related to how to enhance inclusive and equitable quality education in Vietnamese context. So in our group, there are 10 members, and we have 7 high school leaders from different provinces in the Mekong Delta of Vietnam. We have 2 university lecturers who are also administrators. And we are very lucky to have the participation of Dr. Anita from SEAMEO Retract. I would like to summarize some ideas we have agreed with each other during the group work discussion. Because all of us look at the problem from the perspective of teachers in the classroom and also from the perspective of educational leaders. So we all agree that inclusive and equitable quality education is a very important issue. However, this issue hasn't received a lot of effective practices and attention in Vietnamese context, especially at high school education. And currently, there are several problems. We all observe that we have different kinds of students with different needs, learning needs, and they have also a lot of differences in their backgrounds. So we have students with disability. We have students with problem related to gender equity. We also have a lot of students from the minor ethnic student in the Mekong Delta of Vietnam. And the most common problem we realize is that we have a lot of students from economically disadvantaged background. And also the gifted students also need some special support. Talking about the reason that cause difficulty in addressing the problem of inclusive and equitable quality education at high school, we pointed out some common problems as below. First of all, at the classroom level, we realized that generally teachers don't pay a lot of attention and don't have a lot of effective practice in order to improve equality and practice inclusive education in their teaching. And sometimes teachers are aware of the problem, but they don't have enough resources and capacity to cope with the situation. For example, Vietnamese teachers are usually facing a lot of pressure with heavy workload and teaching a very big class size classroom, a lot of students in the classroom, and besides teaching, they also have a lot of commitment related to like how to improve the school and commit other school requirements. So it's very difficult for them to address the needs and the differences among individual students. Another reason is the curriculum. The curriculum doesn't have a lot of space for the teacher or the student to address learners' differences. Especially in the situation of the high school for gifted students. So the curriculum seems to focus too much on academic achievement and not a lot of attention to develop the students' life skill. And generally, all students in the classroom, no matter whether they are weak or strong students, are expected to study the same curriculum, and all of them are expected to perform well. At the system level, we also realize that leaders, school leaders, sometimes have limitation. Some leaders don't have a lot of training and skill in addressing the problem at the school-wide level, and sometimes they are aware of the problem, but it's very difficult to them to solve the problem because of the limitation in terms of budgets and resources. We also realize that there are also something related to cultural practice and cultural factors. For example, in Vietnam, people usually appreciate well-behaving students or the students who are study very well. They have very good or excellent academic recall. So in the classroom, if students sometimes misbehave or they don't pay attention to the teacher or the lesson, and then these students are usually treated as abnormal. And we don't have some kind of special education curriculum in each school, right? So it depends on the teacher's commitment and the teacher ability in order to address the problem, and sometimes it's very difficult. So coming to the solution to the problem, we suggest that first of all, there should be very clear communication among all of the stake members in the educational context. For example, the school leader need to communicate to all of the teachers and also the supporting staff in the school in order to ensure that all members share the same understanding about the problem. For example, from the workshop today, I myself and other participants have a clearer understanding about inclusive education, about equality in education and how to improve it. But high school teacher, for example, our teacher don't have a lot of opportunity to learn about this. So there should be a clear communication across the school and proper understanding and perception will help the teacher to change their practice and also to have a better mindset in order to address the problem. It is also important to have a school-wide plan to address the problem at the system level. And this can be done through providing professional development or effective training to not only the school leaders, but also the teachers. And there should be more investment in terms of resources. For example, we want to ensure equality for students with disability. However, around the school yard and also in the school classroom, we don't have like equipment for these students in order to help them access to the material or the resources of the physical environment. And another suggestion is there need to be the combination between practice, teaching, and action research. And from the finding of the action research, teachers and other stake members can get together in order to share the best practices or to discuss more solutions to the problem. We also emphasize the importance of strengthening the networking among different stakeholders. For example, the networking among different schools in the region or maybe across the country and internationally in order to share best practices and solutions to solve the problem. And it's also necessary to have a better partnership between school and university, between school and other partners in the community, because we all know that inclusive education and equality in education is a very, very important issue, and it takes time in order to create changes and improve it. So there needs to be a collaboration among different stakeholders, and together we can improve the commitment and we can find a better way to support the student and to improve education in general. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hui from An Giang University and participants in Group 1 in the whole SEAMEO region. You are experienced leaders from many schools in Vietnam, and in a very short time, just 30 minutes, but you raise a lot of problems and issue challenges as well as the solution to the problems that you observe. As an organizer, we really appreciate your contribution to the success of the workshop. And as I mentioned, there are a lot of school leaders here in the whole SEAMEO region. May I invite just one more representative from Group 2? May I invite Ms. Nguyễn Thị Ngọc Lan, Principal of South America International School in Ho Chi Minh City, to please briefly, give some comments and summarize the ideas from your group. Thank you.
Yes, a very good morning to all participants in the Zoom and here in the hall. So from my group, I would like to say that from a perspective from a private school, not all school in Ho Chi Minh City or Vietnam, just a private school. So I would like to say that from my practice at my school and the school I worked before, actually, at private school, we try to recruit as many students as possible for a school. But actually, every year we encounter or we meet a lot of parents with their children with disability in learning. For example, they have autism or they have ADHD issue. They have problem in behavior or language, and they come to find like school with small class size to have a better care from the teacher or a better care from the school. And as long as they can afford the tuition fee, so we try to accept but with a moderate level. So normally we have an entrance test. I mean, we check the student before they enter school, whether they can speak or they can write in a proper way or not. They can behave in a proper manner. So actually, we every year we have a few students in this case, and among of them, they are so good at math. Some of them are so good at language too, especially math or STEM or technology. They can have a very special skill, and when the teacher just write the math problem on the board, and they can have the solution immediately. I cannot understand why, but It is true. But I would like to share the problem. When we accept this kind of student in the classroom, just 1 or 2 or 3, just a few, not many. And the problem we face from the other parents of the classroom is that it's not fair for my child to study with this kind of student, because the teachers pay a lot of attention to that student and not my child. So we ask the school, we ask the teacher, we ask the principal not to let our child to study with this child, otherwise we move to another school. So we have to think a lot which one to keep. That's the first problem. The second problem is that we actually in my school we are lucky to have a certified teachers in special education, and we are very confident to get this student. But the other teachers, we lack of teachers who are qualified enough in special education. That's the second one. And the third one is the curriculum, because all students will follow the same curriculum and they will take the same exam. No special choice. So all of them will take the same exam. So it's not fair for them, because some students really struggle with the language. They cannot write. They should do the math. They cannot write the language. And the fourth problem, I think, from public school, because with the bigger size, class size, the teacher cannot, like Ms. Wei had just said, the teacher had a lot of pressures in everything in the school, so they cannot save time, they cannot spend time for the special student. And the public school with the class of about 40 or 35 or 45, for example, the parents said that my child received not enough care from a teacher, and the teacher ignore my child. So we try to find another place with a small class size, with small scale, so my child can receive enough care, enough love from the teacher to study and to get a chance to study like other normal students. So with my problem, I think I need Mr. Phước to share his solution regarding the educational leadership and management. So welcome, Mr. Phước from thank you for your listening.
You have anything to share, Mr. Phước? So please try to make it short, please. Yeah.
Oh, you have 1 minute. Okay. Yeah. After listening to your summaries from all the groups, I discovered two issues again came up in my mind. Number one, the terminology as proposed by Lao team, and I believe that it's time we stop using humiliating or degrading term to refer to children with disability. In Vietnam, we have the term handicapped, trẻ em khuyết tật, and therefore when we label them this children, handicapped children, they will think of themselves as unable to do anything, and that will remain with them throughout their life. And therefore we should use more encouraging words. Number two is I believe that we cannot expect every student to achieve the same level, because children with disability, of course, they have some limitation. So our education is to help them develop their full competency, their full ability only. We should not grade them, give them 5, 4 in comparison to other students who get 8 and 9s. So the thing is that what we think in our group is that we should grade them, for example, A, B, or pass, and needs more improvement, etc. So those are those 2 points that we would like to convey to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lang and Mr. Phước, for summarizing your discussion. And this is the end of the discussion.
Excuse me, can I say something here?
Yes, Dr. Ying, right?
Yeah. For
Okay, may I
the
invite Dr. Ying
assessment,
from room to read? I'm sorry, from Center for Disability and Development, DRD, Vietnam.
I appreciate the recommendation, but something I need to debate here about the assessment of students with disabilities. I don't think that we can have the different assessment for students with disabilities because they have the same competence. It's only for a student with developmental disabilities. Like myself, I'm a wheelchair user, and I can have the education and the same assessment as the other student. So this is something we debate from our educational system for several years. We don't need the separate assessment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ying, for your comments. I think this issue will raise more discussion, and our workshop ends here, but the discussion will go on in our network. After this workshop, we all have contacts and we continue our discussion and sharing after the workshop. Thank you, Dr. Ying, again for your comments. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the discussion, and we will move to the very last session of the workshop. The closing ceremony. At the closing ceremony, we will have a short video recap or some remarks from Dr. Ethel Agnes Basco Valenzuela, SEAMEO Secretariat Director, and closing remarks from SEAMEO Redress Center Director. Now, I would like all participants to please review what we had during the past 2 days. you very much, Hun Ngọc Chami and the tech team for preparing a wonderful video recap. Moving on, I would like to invite Dr. Ethel Agnes Basco Valenzuela, SEAMEO Secretariat Director, to deliver some closing remarks from Thailand.
Honorable officials from the Ministry of Education and Training of Vietnam, Dr. Ho Tan Mi Pung, Director, SEAMEO Regional Training Center, or SEAMEO RETRAC, distinguished speakers and esteemed guests from SEAMEO member countries, our dear directors and officials of SEAMEO regional centers, international partners, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to officially close the regional workshop on enhancing inclusive and equitable quality education in Southeast Asian countries through innovative education. On behalf of the SEAMEO Secretariat, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you for your presence in this important event as part of the Inter-Center Collaboration Project to highlight the efforts in enhancing regional partnership and inter-center collaboration in the implementation of UN Sustainable Development Goals. Your comprehensive comments, valuable insights, perspectives, and experiences shared in this workshop are crucial for our ongoing work in educational leadership and management, special education, and lifelong learning to improve inclusive and equitable quality education to be adopted at the national and regional levels. We have learned a wide range of knowledge from this two-day regional workshop, from issues affecting inclusive and equitable quality education in countries, context, and circumstances in terms of leadership and management, teacher education, skills training, lifelong learning, filling the gaps of disparities, diversities, ethnicities, and social background to challenges, opportunities, solutions, and innovations to enhance inclusive and equitable quality education in the different countries in our region. Moreover, we are delighted to listen to your best practices and experiences, as well as lessons learned in the implementation of UN Sustainable Development Goal number 4 and SEAMEO Priority Area number 2, Addressing Barriers to Inclusion. Kindly allow me to reassure you that all the innovative solutions, conclusions, and significant recommendations you have made during this regional workshop will be taken into consideration in the future policymaking in SEAMEO. I would like to convey my heartfelt gratitude to the esteemed partners for your tremendous support to this regional workshop, as well as the ongoing activities and operations at SEAMEO RETRAC. Undoubtedly, this workshop brings Southeast Asia closer to its vision of promoting regional understanding and cooperation and unity of purpose among member states. SEAMEO, together with 26 centers in Southeast Asia, our members, our network, we are committed in providing opportunities to achieve equal access to quality basic education and learning opportunities for everyone. Last but not least, let me thank Director Fung and the officials and staff of RETRAC for your efforts and hard work in leading and organizing this meaningful event to connect regional education stakeholders to talk about equitable education for everyone. Thank you once again, and I wish you all a lovely weekend.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ethel Valenzuela, for your closing remarks. I don't forget to mention that there are hundreds of participants attending workshop from YouTube Live. I will have the guidance to get e-certificate for you after the closings. Finally, may I invite my director from SEAMEO RETRAC, Dr. Ho Tan Mi Phuong, to deliver the closing remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Ethel Agnes Valenzuela, Director, SEAMEO Secretariat, distinguished keynote speakers, panel speakers, moderators, and participants, ladies and gentlemen. Our regional workshop is coming to the end. We are very privileged and fortunate to have your participation 1.5 days until now. We listened to the remarks at the opening ceremony from our Deputy Minister of Vietnam, Associate Professor Dr. Nguyễn Văn Phúc, and from his remarks, we are updated with a lot of efforts from Vietnam in achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And the 3 keynote speeches from our keynote speakers, Dr. Ethel Valenzuela, and the second one from Ms. Margaret Shark, Israel, from UNESCO Bangkok, and this morning from Dr. Howard Youngs, have provided us with a lot of information and also the different perspectives, approaches, practices, and lessons that we can learn in our effort to enhance inclusive, equitable, quality education in our own context, in our own country. It is very interesting to listen to the presentation and the sharing from the panel speakers since yesterday until this morning, from the 8 countries and also from the SEAMEO regional centers, and also today from the discussion and also from the presentation from the group discussions. A variety of issues and challenges in inclusive, equitable education were clearly identified, and we can find out quite a lot of challenges facing us, not only today, but also in the near future. We all can see that lessons we can learn, best practices that we can apply, solutions in addressing the barriers to quality education, to inclusive, equitable education have been presented from the different angles, from the different experience, different practices in different countries. So in addition to that, we had a very good opportunity to listen to the different projects conducted from the different countries, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and many other countries. And those projects also emphasize the role of educational leadership and management in the effort to achieving inclusive, equitable, quality education. And I hope that you find this regional workshop informative and useful, helpful for you in your effort to address the issue of inclusive quality education in your own context. And I even hope that you can put into your action plan some more ideas, some more activities that you want to do in order to improve your own schools or institutions in the effort to achieve or to enhance better, inclusive, equitable, quality education. On behalf of SEAMEO Regional Training Center, SEAMEO RETRAC, I would like to send my special thanks to our VIP guests at our opening ceremony, Associate Professor Nguyễn Văn Phúc and Dr. Ethel Valenzuela for the remarks. And I'd like to thank our keynote speakers, our panel speakers and moderators from the 8 countries in Southeast Asia. Your presentations are very precious and meaningful for all of us in our effort to address the challenges facing us in our own work related to inclusive, quality, equitable quality education. I'd like to thank all the participants of both online and on-site for spending your time to come and to attend this workshop, and to have your own ideas, your questions, your comments in order to come up with quite a lot of solutions, innovative solutions, as well as suggestions, recommendations in this issue. Finally, I'd like to thank SEAMEO trucks, officers and staff for your commitment and your hard work in putting together and working on the preparation of this event. Before saying goodbye to all of you, I'd like to wish all of you good health, happiness, and success. And SEAMEO truck always welcome all of you back to Vietnam or to another virtual event in the near future. So thank you again, everyone. Goodbye for now, ladies and gentlemen, and see you again soon. Thank you.
As at the MC of the program, I would like to say goodbye to participants in the Zoom and participants, my colleagues and friends in the hall at SEAMEO track. Goodbye. Please allow me to share some guidance for participants on YouTube Live. The IT, could you please open the file for YouTube Live, please? For participants in YouTube Live, may I share some information about how to get the e-certificate of the participation. Participants need to fill up the e-certificate evaluation form. Please ensure the spelling of your full name, organization, and email address. Request for correction of the information on the e-certificate will not be accommodated. The e-certificate will be sent to you by your provided email address within 1 month. For further inquiries, kindly contact SEAMEO track at idd@vnseameo.org. And could you please, type the link that you see in the screen or scan the QR code on the screen to get to know how to get the e-certificate of participation. Once again, on behalf of the organizers at SEAMEO track and SEAMEO Secretariat, I would like to thank you very much, all participants from all Southeast Asian countries for your participation on YouTube Live. Thank you and hope to see you again in future events. Thank you.
Cái này là sai bên máy kia. Ok.